Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company and the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome.
We have some new equipment today that we're trying out, so hopefully everything will run well all morning. We have larger mics, as you can see. We used to have the lapel mics, and now we have these big things, and we have to be right up tight there. So once in a while, they're going to tell us, don't turn your head because they can't hear you when you do that.
Yeah, it promises to be a little bit of an adventure today. First time trying out the upgraded studio equipment, but looking forward to having a great broadcast with you guys.
And we have mics for the studio crew as well. Should we do an introduction? Can you guys switch some cameras over to Aaron first? And
we don't have individual cameras just yet.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I know we have Aaron, and we have Jesse, of course, who just spoke, and we have Richard as well.
There we go.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
In the foreground is Richard, and in the background is Aaron, and they'll be chiming in at times. And then Jesse is back there with a whole bunch of new equipment and dials, and pretty preoccupied at this point. And if you notice, there's a seagull in between us. He's intently listening. This is, again, La Jolla, spring break time, and beautiful area there to just simply walk the beach early morning especially. All right, so one of the first images I want to pop up, guys, is we've got an EV conversion guy that is probably the most creative EV conversion that I've seen. The picture is called EV conversion, and what you'll see here is one of the most inexpensive ways to convert your ICE vehicle to an electric vehicle.
Go ahead, Pete. It's going to take me just a second.
All right.
As we wait for that particular image to come up, all I can say is I can't wait to be able to do that myself one of these days.
And it is probably the most inexpensive EV conversion ever. So if that was really possible, it would certainly motivate a lot more people to convert. There we go. What you're seeing there, of course, is the bell housing on a transmission shaft, which normally couples to the engine. And we have a DC motor there with a battery, and a much smaller battery than usually are used in EVs. And if this would really work, it would be pretty cool, would it not?
That would be pretty cool if it actually worked. I like to joke with my wife about all the squirrels that the cars have under the hood, and this would be about equivalent to 2 squirrels, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And A for effort for this person that created this picture and this shot. So we've got a news item here. Florida property insurance rates are set to jump 60%. And they show a picture here of a bunch of flooding and homes flooded, of course. And
Hold on real quick, Pete. I'm sorry. We got a comment saying that we have audio issues. Mark, how do I boost this volume? They're saying it's quiet.
If it's too quiet, go ahead and go to the main channel that we had turned down a little bit and turn it back up.
This is on the way up, and then I put you guys up as well.
Go ahead and continue to, have you put us all the way up?
we're fixing audio issues right now. If it is coming through properly, please let us know. It looks like they're still dialing it in.
There's no change in my monitor sound, so I don't really know how to tell the difference. But I suppose, yeah, if you guys can just let us know. If you want to let them know, Pete.
All right, we've got a YouTube comment coming in from My Melt, and
It's just the laughing emojis.
okay, all right.
Thought the picture that you had up was funny.
Okay.
I know that we're working through some of our audio issues as well. I suppose we will try to go ahead and continue at this point while Jesse continues to try to work through these. We've
And we
got
can-
most of our volumes and stuff dialed up.
Yeah, we can talk louder into the microphone if that helps as well. Please let us know if you're unable to hear us at all. If it's low, please let us know that as well. And the topic that we started with here a moment ago was that Florida property insurance rates are set to jump 60%. And what I found humorous about this this article was a comment that someone posted, which was, "Climate change is real when the insurance rates say it is." So, moving right along here, do we have any questions coming in there, Aaron? Or any questions from viewers?
They're still coming in right now,
Okay.
so.
All right. I really wanted to make sure that our audio problems were resolved before we move into these juicier topics.
You know, one thing that we can potentially do, Pete, while we're having the guys work on some of the audio issues, is give a quick shout out again to Sandy Monroe.
Yeah.
What we had for that podcast this last Thursday seems to have been pretty popular with people, and definitely is. Thank you very much. We really, really enjoyed the time that we had.
Yeah, the Monroe team, the Monroe Live team, by the way, is a very professional, generous team with their time and their willingness to collaborate. They're just a class act. We really enjoy being partners in this social media space with them, and look forward to some more collaborations. Sandy did mention that he will be coming out here to see us. He's intrigued by our service center, the auto shop of the future, as we call it, and there's a lot of content there that he will be greatly interested in. It'll be a bit of a deviation from his normal fare, which is going to the auto manufacturers, actually seeing what happens after the vehicles are produced and the challenges that we face out here in the independent service space, trying to keep these vehicles running or being relevant in a service effort which typically does not have the same levels of support that the OEMs are able to provide for their vehicles.
Most definitely. And if things work out like we're hoping, it sounds like you and he might be spending some time over at Edelweiss as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I asked him at one point, he was at the Tesla investor event, and they had a informal podcast after the event at a local bar there, Clive's Bar. And a number of them were up on stage, including Sandy, and I noticed that he was holding a glass of beer, which looked cloudy. And typically cloudy beers are the Bavarian beers because they have very strict laws regarding no flavorings, filtering, only natural yeast be used. And I think this is a law that's been around since the 1400s. So I suspected that he may be drinking a good Bavarian beer. So during the podcast, I asked him, I've got an unrelated question here, but that beer that you were holding, might that have been Hefeweizen? And he said, yes. He was kind of surprised that I recognized that. From there, we began to talk about the fact that he has German descendants and his roots are from there, so we had a lot in common. And when he comes here, I made him a commitment that we're going to a local German beer garden here, not too far from our office, which is owned by a Bavarian from Munich, and he has 17 or 18 Bavarian Hefeweizens on tap, which is unprecedented, at least for Arizona. It looks like we have a YouTube comment from Christopher Korn. He's asking, any updates on the floor tile removal from the warehouse? I did send a recommendation for floor tile removal device from a rental store.
I am not familiar with the floor tile removal that would need to be done for us.
Oh, you know what? That was in the early days of us creating our service center. There was VCT tile that was glued to the floor. After a couple decades of use, the glue had basically bonded with the concrete. And try as we may, we were attempting chipping. We even sharpened blades on a forklift to try to scrape it up. And it just wasn't a very elegant solution. So eventually a floor company came in that was also grinding the floor prior to the application of two-part epoxy and some aggregate. And they had a different type of equipment that was finally able to get up some of that. But thank you for remembering that.
Oh, that's right, and that probably comes from the video that we released this last week as well that got some extra views.
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube, the Environmental Canadian has commented saying that climate change environmental damage is just starting to affect property insurance rates in Florida. It's already locked in devastation is going to make insurance even more expensive. Peace, Calvin.
Yeah. You know, the lesson there is insurance companies are risk management companies, and they pass on their risk, their elevated risks. So when there are natural disasters like this, it will change the cost for insurance for sure.
Oh, by all means. And when once they get to a situation where they don't know what risk is, they just jack up the rates even more because unknown is always expensive.
And if allowed, they leave those higher rates in place if the problem begins to dissipate and go away.
Yeah. Now, for the people just joining us, like Elhend71 on TikTok, we are the Gruber Morning Show here. I know that we've been dealing on our YouTube platform with some quiet audio, so we're taking questions, talking about some of the first things that we had up as our first topic. Our main topic on these Tuesday and Thursday morning podcasts, though, is everything electric vehicles, green energy. We talk about solar, we talk about wind, we typically focus on electric vehicles, and most of the time we focus on Tesla electric vehicles.
So I personally have some very strong opinions about the migration of supercar manufacturers moving into the EV space and their ability to do so and what their first step should be. It's coming clear to me that some of these companies aren't quite ready yet to go full bore into electric vehicles, and they're trying to dip their toes into the water before they do something by creating a hybrid version of their performance cars, which again, in my opinion, is a complete and total mistake. It is not going to work well for a number of reasons, but the latest headline here is that Lamborghini's first electric vehicle will not be an SUV, as everyone had thought, or an off-road vehicle, which is, of course, a sigh of relief.
Yes,
right? All right.
yes, definitely.
There is a but, though. But the sports car will now be a 2+2 GT, as they call it. The first fully electric vehicle will not be off-the-road capable, but it will be instead a four-seater Grand Tourer, according to the CEO, Stefan Winkelmann. It's going to be a new body style, and which, of course, is completely missing in their current body style. Well, here are my thoughts on that. There are two types of exotic car owners. These owners, the first ones, are the weekend warriors. And these are the rich guys. They've got a career. They're working 60 hours a week. And, this car is a detour for them on the weekend. And what they like to do is take their exotic on the weekends to Starbucks Sunday morning, the golf course, car shows and meetups, and go on gentle cruises with their favorite music blasting, or just enjoy the loud whine of a 12-cylinder engine with the top down. The second type of owner are the ones that are more serious about the car, and they might even track their car, pushing it to its limits, or go on supercar runs into the mountains or open roads with other exotic car owners and do a Mario Andretti impersonation, trying, of course, to avoid the constables who would frown on triple-digit speeds. Both of these owners enjoy a solo activity, maybe with a trophy wife or girlfriend, but certainly not with kids, pets, grandma, or trying to have a conversation in their exotic car. I just can't imagine that Lamborghini, Stefan Winkelmann, the CEO, has done their homework, asking owners what changes they want to see, and the overwhelming response to that question would be, well, we want a quieter cabin with extra seats so we can sit and visit with people that are joining us on our drive. Completely wrong direction here. And, Lamborghini's not the only one considering or doing this. Corvette, a hybrid Corvette, a Prius on steroids. Just from a manufacturing standpoint, the daunting challenge for any of these incumbents that have been building exquisitely machined exotic cars with engines that are over the top, to attempt to get into the EV space by trying to shoehorn an electric drivetrain and maintain their normal engines is the way too much work. It's just the wrong direction, you know? And I can't imagine they're going to be successful pulling off an engineering project that creates something that would work well, you know?
I mean, I can't imagine, hey, honey, let's grab the kids and run down to Home Depot in the Lamborghini, and, you know, we might have to leave the back up a little bit because we're going to get a couple of 2x4s and bring them home.
Right, right.
That's not the demographic. Maybe they're trying to look at a whole different demographic, but the people who like to do the run around with the families or go visit friends or something like that, they're not the people who are typically going to be driving a Lamborghini.
Yeah. And then, of course, for the owners, it represents twice the maintenance. You now have an ICE component drivetrain to maintain, and you've got the EV component to maintain. And the worst part is the people that are able to work on their cars are not EV trained.
Right.
I know many of them. We've got one down the road here. You throw an EV into that shop, and they would all scratch their heads and be puzzled by how to repair this thing. So again, for those of you watching, the exotic car manufacturers, if you're going to make the EV conversion, do it right. Do 100% EV conversion. Remember, the ultimate goal is to get fossil fuel burners off the road, not create more or more high-maintenance versions with a hybrid drivetrain with ICE and EV. And, you know, do your homework and do a proper EV. And remember the roots of your companies. And this is a message to McLaren, to Lamborghini, to Ferrari, any of these exotic car manufacturers. People enjoy sports cars, your sports cars. They enjoy the two-seater aspect, and they don't want an audience or family members in the car with them, or at least in the back seat. So anyway, that's my advice to the exotic car manufacturers. It'll be interesting to see whether they listen.
Yes. Now, we have a couple of other questions that have come in this morning. Again, from Environmental Canadian. By the way, we didn't say it first time. Good morning. He says, I love your channel, gentlemen. I discovered you via Sandy Monroe. By the way, I'm a German Canadian.
Well, welcome, welcome.
Also, he asks the question, will you be providing modifications to Cybertrucks?
Once they come out and we see one in our shop, most certainly. Our Gruber Motor Company effort is an independent service organization, and when these vehicles begin to be released, we typically do not see them because they're under warranty.
Right.
So the service and maintenance aspect is usually many years down the road before we see vehicles like this. We're seeing Tesla Model S's now, lots of them. The Roadsters were the first ones that began to congregate at our shop. And some of the other incumbents that are making vehicles, like Lucid, for example, we probably won't see those unless it's an aftermarket deviation that the customer wants to do. Better suspension, for example. Maybe tires, better brakes. But until that warranty expires, we don't see many of these vehicles, and that will include the Cybertruck initially.
I know that the Tesla Model 3s are just now starting to come off a warranty for everything except their powertrain and battery systems, so I believe we've started to see some more of those. And I know that there's at least one manufacturer that's reached out to us about the possibility of becoming an authorized service center, so we might start seeing some others come in that are under warranty in that case.
Good point, Mark. And that has to do with the fact that the new EV manufacturers are going to need to be highly focused on production goals and building their production lines and taking design type issues. And their ability to scale their service delivery will probably lag, and they're going to begin to outsource. We've seen that in many other industries.
Yeah.
In the critical power business, for example, we are a nationwide critical power service organization, but in the low volume areas, we rely on subcontractors because it just doesn't make sense to put an employee or employees into a region where you're essentially going to turn them into Maytag repairmen.
Right, exactly. Van Goat Wagon is back online this morning, and good morning. He tells us good morning as well.
Good. Thanks for joining us. We've got a long question from LinkedIn, John Hickey. And he apologizes for the long question, but let's see what he's got to ask. He says, I watched many of your videos and agree with the shop tech of the future. But what do you see as the future of independent workshops? Will there basically be a light service model and then full service shops like yours? How about numbers? Reports say that we could see 40% or more of the current independents closing when we go full EV. Do you agree with that? And then given the current market of around 150,000 independents, how many shops like yours will be needed in the U.S. to repair 250 million or more passenger cars? You know, those are excellently crafted questions, and if we can scroll
Yeah.
back up, we need to take those one at a time. I'm not going to remember them all in sequence. So what do we see as far as the future of independent workshops? What I see, is that the cars are going to have to get smarter. The ability to generate and build and create independent shops like ours at the scale and volume that is required is not realistic. It requires a whole new set of skills. We cannot, for example, our growth is hampered. People ask us all the time, why don't you open in Los Angeles, New York,
Right,
scale
right.
your operation. You're highly successful here in Phoenix. The problem is you can't find people. What we need is 3 fundamental skills that don't reside in one individual. We need software skills. These cars are all about software. They're computers on wheels. We need electronic skills, and the reason for that is the independents don't have the parts rooms that the OEMs do in their service centers. They just simply swap modules and swap parts. We have to repair things right down to component level. And when I mean component level, it's not going to be bearings and gaskets and rings on pistons. It's going to be electronic devices, diodes, IGBT transistors, microchips, resistors, capacitors. And the average mechanic does not possess those skills. And then the third, of course, is wrenching ability.
Right.
The ability to take all those parts out, including doing some of the low-tech auto work, which is suspension and brakes and body parts and panels and things like that. So we see a serious shortage that is not going to relieve by more demand. The demand is there now. We actually have to turn away Model S business at times because we don't have the capacity to take them all in. We focus on roadsters, and that's our highest priority at this point, because those roadsters have very few limited options to get the type of work done that we do. The simple answer for, that I think is going to solve some of this is the cars are going to have to get smarter. We're going to have to move AI into the cars. We're going to have to make them self-diagnosing, and then when they do go to an OEM service center, the repair effort is much faster and minimal, and it doesn't require the in-depth skills.
You know, Sandy, when we talked to him on Thursday of this last week, gave an absolutely phenomenal analogy about this. His grandfather was a steam engine mechanic, and in the early 1900s, there was a transition from steam engines to diesel engines. He found that all of his skills that he had learned on steam engines, or the vast majority of them anyway, were useless.
No longer relevant.
No longer relevant. The same thing is going to occur here. There are going to be a bunch of people that are going to take advantage of that opportunity. So yes, we may see 40% or more of independent shops that exist today close. We're also going to see a large percentage of people take advantage of the opportunity to be flexible, to change. And it may be that you have independent shops that specialize in the more mechanical parts of the electric vehicle. I don't know that that is a high enough revenue generating type of thing to do. I think what you're going to see is a lot more people get into the engineering side over time, but the change is going to be painful, just like it was 100 years ago.
And highly disruptive. There will be a shortage of service organizations. The other part of the question is, the 40% going away. You know, there are auto shops in our neighborhood here.
Yeah.
And they are mature. They have excellent wrenching skills. Some even have advanced skills like rebuilding transmissions. All of that is going away. Rebuilding engines, what's the point? You know, rebuilding electronics is completely different than rebuilding an engine, a mechanical engine. And the people working in those types of shops are not going to be able to pivot and acquire those new set of skills.
Peter needs you to talk directly in your mic.
Directly in the mic. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, I think, with the question where he says, do you agree that we could see 40% of these shops closing? I think that is possible. I also could see almost like you have ghost kitchens today. They're restaurants that don't have a dining area. They're built specifically for takeout orders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the future, we could see the same type of thing. You get your engineers put together in a large repair shop, and that repair shop becomes almost like a distribution center. So you have your independent shop that doesn't have the ability to do the in-depth engineering, sending their parts off to be rebuilt. The large engineering shop then rebuilding, returning that part, or actually having a stock of those parts back in. Not unlike what can happen to transmissions today.
Mm-hmm.
You send a core out, it goes over to Borg Warner or another one of the large transmission manufacturers to be remanufactured and then to be put back in the market.
Sure.
I could see a lot more of that.
Yeah, what'll be interesting to see is the like you said, the independent specialty shops that will emerge from this EV space. For example, the transmission rebuild shops that exist now that specialize in that are typically even better than the dealers or the people that are generalists. Muffler shops, same thing. They're highly evolved. They have all the equipment to bend the pipes and weld things together, and they can customize and all that. How that's going to translate into the other part of the question, will there be light shops and the heavy-duty shops, is yet to be determined.
I think very much so. The last part of his question was, how many shops like ours do you think would be needed in the U.S. to repair the 250 million or more passenger cars that are going to be out there?
Oh, my God. Don't have a crystal ball there, but it is definitely going to have to be a massive amount to equal what we currently have for ICE. The other thing that we don't know yet is how quickly ICE vehicles will go away. I know that they won't be able to be produced anymore by certain years, like 2035.
Right.
There are major manufacturers that are going to stop ICE production. Jaguar, a whole bunch of them have gone on record saying by 2030, 2035, we're not going to build anymore. But that doesn't mean that people are going to discard their cars. They will continue to try to use their ICE cars. The unknown at this point is, at what point in time will the government step in and say, global warming, climate change is severe enough to where we now need to ban fossil fuel burners on the roads? And I know no one likes to talk about that or even consider that, but that day may be coming depending on how bad this gets. Earlier in our podcast, we talked about insurance rates in Florida jumping 60%, and of course it's being attributed to climate change.
Sure. I mean, Miami currently sits at about 8 feet above sea level. If Miami in 20 years is 8 feet below sea level and there's all kinds of flood damage on a consistent basis, that's going to turn some heads. That's going to influence people.
It's going to put some laws on the books, yes, without a doubt.
So Van Goatwagen has a recommendation for us. He says, I recommend starting a Gruber University.
We get that offer all the time, or that question. People want to send us their technicians from all over the world, actually. Can they just do an internship? Can they train with you guys? There are, however, EV training programs beginning to emerge. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. The college up in Whittier.
Yes.
Do you remember the name?
I don't right off the top of my head.
It's the START program, and the acronym really has nothing to do with the description, by the way. I think it started with the correct acronym and then migrated or evolved into something else. But this college up in Whittier, California, does offer an EV training program, and it is not funded but supported by Tesla. And of course, the goal then becomes that Tesla is attempting to create more technicians to fill their service centers. They face the same problem we do. You can't find people. And so this is one way, at least, to create a student body. Yes, Jesse?
Real quick, we're going to have to place you on hold. I'm going to try and switch to a different audio input.
We're switching to a different audio system here, so if you can hear us, be patient. We'll be done here in hopefully a few seconds.
And in the meantime, maybe Richard or Aaron can look up the name of that community college up by Whittier.
Yeah, I was looking into it. I'm not having any luck just yet.
I think
So-
it was Hino College or something like that.
No.
Does that ring a bell? Anyway, for those of you watching, coming in a little bit late, behind us is La Jolla coastline. And I figured since it was spring break time, which is when I took these pictures many years ago, it's just a beautiful area of the world. Sea lions, seagulls, of course, and wonderful beaches that you can walk, jog, or whatever you like to do, or even surf, body surf, whatever you're into. So that's what the picture is about. Also, we have some technical problems still, and a lot of expenditures took place over the last week after our unsuccessful podcast with Jameson Cummings, which we're going to try again, by the way, for our Tesla Roadster podcast. But we're dialing in all of this equipment. When I look out now at the studio here, I see mountains of equipment. I see lots of blinking lights. And technology is a wonderful thing. Despite spending all that money, it's still not working properly.
Yeah, I know that we're getting the sound and stuff dialed in. It's a lot of stuff we put in all at once.
Mm-hmm. I have actually, there's a question up there about battery technology. And this might be a good time to introduce a new type of battery that they just announced. It is a metal-free aqueous battery that can address the projected shortages of strategic metals. We're talking about cobalt and lithium and address some of the safety issues found in lithium-ion batteries. Oh, the college, by the way, Rio Hondo College up in Whittier, California. What someone was going to check into to see if they had an online program, so those of you that don't want to travel to Whittier to go to school, you would be able to do an online course. Although I think that would be difficult because it seems to me that EV training would be a lot of lab time as well.
I would think so, but
Yeah.
it might not be impossible, but I think it'd be difficult.
So getting back to this water battery, researchers at Texas A&M University have been exploring a water-based battery that uses water-based electrodes, and it is energy storage capable as much as 1,000% improvement. Now, this goes right along with the questions that we get constantly. What battery technology do you like the best? What do you see coming? Well, the battery technology can improve exponentially, fundamentally because there's a financial incentive to do so. There's an enormous demand for a better battery, higher range battery, more energy density battery, and something that alleviates some of. Well, this uses water apparently, and it consists of a cathode, an electrolyte, and an anode, like a regular battery. But this water-based battery, the anode and cathodes are polymers. They can store energy. And polymers, of course, aren't rare metals. They're easily reproducible. And the electrolyte is a mixture of organic salts, water with organic salts. Now you're able to do a transfer of ions back and forth between the cathode and anode, which is where voltage comes from, electricity. It's electrons moving around. And so this is now being touted as potentially the newest type of battery technology. They mention a name here. The chemical engineering professor is Dr. Jody Lutkenhaus. And she reiterates that there's 1,000% difference in energy storage capacity with this battery.
You know, the basics on the battery construction, you've talked about a cathode and an anode or an anode, and they're kind of the plus and minus sides of the battery for those of you guys listening out there. And then in between the cathode and anode are some sort of a salt, usually a metal-based salt. And that salt and an electrolyte, which is nothing more than a solution to help facilitate the movement of ions or the movement of electricity. That salt is made out of lithium, or now we're trying to find other metals that will work and that are more prevalent. For example, sodium is a metal. And salt, we think of sodium chloride or table salt. It's one of our most prevalent metals in the world. It's one of the most prevalent elements. Potassium And so we have things such as sodium ion batteries, potassium ion batteries. Now we're talking about simply a water-based battery. I think it's a wonderful idea if they can get that to work. At some point, someone will end up coming up with the battery that's just a next step above where we're at now, that has higher energy density, better discharge and better charging capabilities, is much less volatile than our lithium ion batteries, and is cheaper to make than the lithium ion batteries, and doesn't hurt the environment quite as much as the lithium mining does. And for the capitalists out there, it's all a money thing.
And I just realized that Jesse, one of our social media team members, must be very preoccupied, because usually when we get to this part of the conversation, a better battery technology, he chimes in and reminds us that fusion technology is the future.
That's
right,
right.
Jesse? They won't be able to hear him. His mic is dead. All right. So we've got another news item here. GM reports breakout year for EVs. And they were all excited because in the last quarter, they delivered 20,670 electric vehicles, 19,000 Bolts, 968 Cadillac Lyrics, and 2 Hummer EVs. And so they're pretty excited about this. Now, while this looks like a stellar accomplishment for GM, what are the Tesla stats for that quarter?
Well, you know, Tesla was absolutely killed for shipping out only 420,000 cars in the fourth quarter of 2022. And that was because they were expected to ship out 440,000 or more, and they missed their estimates.
As somebody pointed out, I love the media bias. Honestly, from yesterday to today, GM delivering 20,000 EVs is all positive news, and everybody's happy, and it's a breakout year for EVs. Tesla delivering 422,000 EVs, and it's doom and gloom.
Yeah, by all means. Although I do agree with the original article saying that 2023 is becoming a breakout year. So far this year, over 7% of all vehicles sold are electric. And that is in contrast with about 5.5% last year. And at the beginning of last year, it was down only around 4%. So that's like a 75% increase in the percentage of EVs that are sold as part of the overall vehicle market. And just in January, there were nearly 68,000 electric vehicles sold just among the top 10 brands. That doesn't even count all vehicles that were out there that were sold.
Interesting news. So it looks like Tesla is adding a 4th production shift at Giga Berlin in Germany to double production rates. And I'm not sure how you could do a 4th shift, because they're 8-hour shifts. And I think you end up at 24 after 3 shifts.
Right, but is it not true in Germany and much of the European Union that they have gone to 4-day work weeks?
Okay, all right. I thought you were going to say they're on a different time zone and they actually have extra hours in the day. But that would have been news to me. Well, that's possible, although they don't mention it in this article. You know, it looks like Giga Berlin is beginning to hit its stride. The full capacity of that plant is 10,000 vehicles per week.
Right.
And they're currently at 5,000. They, I guess, broke that record last month. So they have some room to grow. But the other fascinating thing about this is, and it's in one of our other news items here, apparently Denmark has a huge increase in electric vehicle adoption and sales. And if I can find it here, I will share that statistic with you. And one can only surmise that these EVs are coming from Giga Berlin, because Denmark's not too far from Berlin.
Yes.
It looks like we have a message from social media. What's going on, guys? Okay, all right.
By all means, we will let the audience know that audio is going to be going up. And John Hinkle on LinkedIn had come to us and said that our audio level is much better on LinkedIn. So thank you very much.
Okay.
It is better, but now it's
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like we've got some questions to entertain.
Yeah, and first on YouTube, My Melt says better, thanks. I think that was referring to our audio level as well. That happened about 5 minutes ago. And then John Hickey says thanks. He's agreed on the turnover. He says if nothing changes and about a 5% turnover of the car park any given year without government intervention, we're looking at 20 years after 100% of EV sales per year started. That sounds like it's about right. You know, you give it usually, I know here in the United States, car makers are required by the federal government to provide parts for their cars for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it's optional.
So YouTube, Edward Crump, welcome Edward. He says, I was at a very active Tesla service center here in Santa Rosa recently in California. While waiting, I took note of how quiet it was, how it didn't smell of oil, gas, and he left it out, but exhaust.
Mm-hmm.
And there were no technicians wiping cleaning fluids off their arms with oily rags. What do you think the opportunity is for the future of private report service centers such as yours? Well, of course, it's very bright. The difficulty, and we just addressed this earlier, is finding people to staff it with. But the first thing that people typically say when we take them on tours through our service center, and by the way, we do that daily these days.
Mm-hmm.
Even people from Tesla or ex-Tesla people enjoy it because it's a nostalgic visit for them, seeing all of those Tesla Roadsters, just like the old days in San Carlos and Menlo Park. The first observation is, my God, your floors are so clean. I don't see any oil spills anywhere.
Sure.
And then the second thing is odor. It is odor-free, you know. I mean, when you're working on ICE vehicles, oftentimes you have to run the engine inside the building. And that's going to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
feed some carbon monoxide and some fumes into the building. We have none of that. And then, of course, how quiet it is. Now, that it's quiet until they use an air impact wrench on a tire, you know, or on
Right.
a wheel. But typically, yeah, they are a much different environment than your traditional ICE engine type repair shops.
Van Wagon also adds to us, have you guys been able to enjoy or study the F1 EV racing series?
You know, I haven't watched it. It's for me personally, the sound is part of the experience. So if I'm watching F1, you know, I want to hear the whine of those engines because I know
Sure.
what's going on inside that engine block. The EVs are a bit unhinging. You know, you see extreme speed, and but it's not quite as realistic to me.
Yeah, and I have not had a chance to watch it yet. I have followed it a little bit. Very intrigued by it, but I just haven't found it on TV yet to watch. I'm looking forward to trying to find one of the races on TV and watch one.
Mm-hmm. We have a YouTube question from Eric R. He says, you mentioned it took 8 hours to remove a Tesla battery top cover. We're talking about the Tesla Model S. And it is, they use a sealer to keep that top cover and prevent any water ingress. Have we tried, he asks, heated tools to pry them, to pry it off? For example, portable induction heater coupled with a steel pry entry tool. The first time we tried that, Eric, was on a DC to DC converter, which also had some sealant and two halves, two clamshells basically, and it worked reasonably well. What they typically do is they've developed custom tools that get underneath the lid and begin to separate it from the tub. So that 8 hours may have been an old spec that we were used to. I think the funniest one that I saw with someone trying to remove that battery lid off a Model S was Rich Rebuilds, when he had a battery pack underneath a lift, a battery lift with a pickup truck on top, and he was working underneath, and he pried up the first part of that battery lid, chipped it and pried it, and then eventually drilled a couple of 1.5-inch holes on either side of that lid, hooked it to a tow chain, and then coupled it to the lift and began to raise the lift to rip that thing off the battery pack. Of course, it worked because the pack weighs 1,200 pounds, so you didn't have to keep it down, and but the lid was not reusable. We can't do that in our world because we have to do body work after we're done fixing that battery to reuse that lid. And any compromises to that lid in terms of tweaking or bends or fissures would create a water ingress situation. So we have to be very careful, which is part of the reason it takes so much time for us, is that we have to very gingerly take that apart.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when we are looking at a Lucid where it has that sealed battery and it doesn't have an actual lid where when you drop the battery, you are by default removing the lid from the battery as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lucid uses gaskets, we found out, and that's a far more elegant solution. The analogy I like to use is for those of you that have worked on ice engine cars, if you ever take off a valve cover, you've got a bunch of 7/16 bolts, and then there's a gasket, either rubber or cork, and that cover comes right off, and oftentimes it's reusable.
Yes. Elhen71 on TikTok has a question for us that we'll re-explain to our TikTok viewers. He's saying, where are all the pictures? All I see is a green background. We are trying to work with our video production provider to integrate TikTok into the same stream that we have with our other platforms. At this point, the provider and TikTok haven't been cooperating like we would like them to, and so they simply haven't made available the keys to us the software keys to us to be able to do that. As a result, TikTok runs on a different platform, and we're not able to view the pictures on that platform. All you're seeing is the actual green screen instead of the pictures themselves.
And for those of you that want the full experience, feel free to move over to YouTube, where we're also broadcasting, and you'll be able to see the background. The background, by the way, is La Jolla, California. We've got a beach scene with a seagull between Mark and I, and it's just a gorgeous place for spring break, which is around the time that this picture was taken. So we did a video, or released a video, about a week or so ago, and it was one that we had released a couple years ago or so, and the title of it was, "What's Wrong with Tesla?" And of course, everybody was expecting some Tesla bashing because that was really prevalent back then. Not much different now, actually, but we started the video with me standing in front of a Tesla service center, and I said something like, if you're expecting some Tesla bashing, this is the wrong video for you. What we're going to demonstrate is that everything that you thought was wrong with Tesla may actually be what makes them so successful. And then we hit a number of bullet points. One of my favorites was I mentioned a bunch of car manufacturers, GM and VW and Toyota and Nissan, and the list went on. And then I mentioned Tesla, and I said, of course, Tesla, everybody knows Elon. How many of you know the CEOs of these other car companies I mentioned? And there were very few that actually came to light. Mary Barra now, though, is one that's actually
Mary
in the
Barra
limelight.
with GM now.
But back then she wasn't when we first did this video. And then we described the fact that, Elon doesn't quite behave like your normal CEO. I mean, the last thing that, in fact, was in the video was when he was swatting at a drone that was flying by them. And usually the guys in suits, aren't that animated. All right.
Right.
But so anyway, the feedback from that video was quite remarkable, and I'm going to share a few of them with you. He says, this was a German viewer. He says, "Great video. These types of videos are one of the reasons why Tesla doesn't need to do advertising." Now here's another one. He says, "Gruber is no crazy fanboy, just a smart, creative guy with the real deal everyday Tesla facts. Some are well known and others not so much. This video tells an ongoing story and history of what will be one of the greatest Musk companies of all time. Thank you for a beautifully done video." Here's another one. "Oh my God, who are you? This could almost have been a TED Talks presentation." And then finally, this one always gets sprinkled in. "Why does he always wear sunglasses?"
Oh, yeah.
So we enjoyed doing that video. It was a recreation, basically, with a few updates. Richard's talents were applied, and we had new B-roll in there with higher resolution. And it's become one of our more successful videos, and I think we're just over 20,000 views on that video at this point. It's a good watch, by the way, because, again, it tells an interesting story, and it presents a realistic view of what Tesla is and where they're going.
We do appreciate all of you who have taken time to watch the video as well. YouTube Environmental Canadian has given us another comment back, just FYI, and this is as much for Jesse as anyone. Video looks great on YouTube, and the sound is fixed as well. Thanks, Calvin. So thank you very much, Calvin, for the feedback.
And good job, Jesse.
Another one on YouTube, Juan Carlos Morataya Ramos. Hi from Guatemala. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for telling us where you're from. We encourage everybody who comes in to tell us where they're coming from.
Let's see. TikTok, iHen71. How much does it cost to replace an EV battery? Well, the ones that we're most familiar with are the Roadster batteries, for example. It's $30,000 plus tax in the United States, and it's only done at this point at a Tesla service center. There's been some discussion about letting us buy the packs and putting them in at our service center, because that's what we do all day long, but it hasn't come to fruition yet.
Right.
The Tesla Model S or X, a refurbished battery pack is about $15,000, and that was corroborated again yesterday from a customer that is considering putting one in their car. The brand new battery pack used to be $22,000, and now they're being quoted at $20,000.
Okay.
And, you know, that is a pack with a full warranty, so that may be, I mean, the delta between 15 and 20 isn't that great. Maybe that warranty is worth it to some people.
Not at all. I know a few months ago, somebody was quoted a price for a replacement pack, but it was a smaller pack. I think it was a 70 kilowatt pack, and it was around $12,000.
12, okay. For the smaller packs, yeah. If they end up not having a refurbished, smaller pack for you, what they will do is give you the lower cost price, but then they cork the battery to make that 85 or 90 or whatever it was only eligible for charging to 70 kW. Now, that's not bad in and of itself, because if they cork a battery or limit its capacity, your cells will typically last longer. So that may be a good plan as well.
Right, because then you're only charging the cells to 80%, even if you're telling the car to charge to 100. Yeah, I could see that. That's not a bad idea.
And if you change your mind later, they have what's called an uncorking fee, which then allows you to get the full capabilities of your battery if you wanted to move it from 70 back up to 90 or whatever that pack is eligible for.
You know, I'm sure there will be those people who chafe at the idea that they're paying for something but not getting the full capabilities of it.
Oh, it's a critical power world. It's the world that we're in as well.
Absolutely.
Where you can buy a 500 kVA UPS, and if you select to only have it operate at 100 kVA, to change it to 250 or go up to 500 requires thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. And the argument there is, your guy comes in, puts a laptop on it. Within 2 minutes, he's got it uncorked or, expanded. And I bought this thing with all the hardware. So why are you charging me all this extra amount, to uncork it? It's a valid argument, I guess. All right, YouTube, Juan Carlos Morataya Ramos. He says, when do you recommend to change the cooling seal on the rotor of a large drive unit in the Model S? The motor is what we're talking about, I'm sure, not rotor. The technology has improved to the point where that part really doesn't need to be replaced periodically. I don't think it's a wear part anymore. The early versions did have some problems with those seals. So I don't think there is a scheduled maintenance time for that replacement.
My Melt on YouTube also gives us some feedback on the sound. He says, I have sound through ear pods. The sound is right in there with a thumbs up. So again, thank you, Jesse, for all the technical work you're doing.
So if we can throw a picture up, guys, of the next small Tesla. There's been some news about this vehicle. Some call it the Model 2. self-imposed target of 20 million vehicles per year by the end of the decade, the company needs to come up with a lower price car that could be produced at scale far larger than the Model 3 and the Model Y. There was talk again at the Investor Day about this next generation vehicle. Speculation is that it will be produced at Gigafactory Mexico, and it is expected to be offered at a lower price point than the current 3 and Y models. And it may also have numerous innovations that would make it easier and more cost-effective to build. Tesla's constantly working on their production lines, like the GigaPress, for example, which reduces the cost of production. That's where Sandy shines, is guiding them and helping them and analyzing the changes they're making and whether they're sound or not. So they are claiming that that this vehicle will not only be worked or be built in Texas, but also eventually in some of the other manufacturing plants, with the lion's share being, of course, Mexico. 2 million cars per year is what's predicted on an annual basis. And they say Giga Berlin, Giga Shanghai will be about 1 million units of each of these each year. So again, these are projections. It hasn't happened yet, but we're all anxiously waiting for a $25,000 EV because that seems to be a tipping point when the rest of the world is going to join EV adoption.
By all means, and I had looked up some additional information. Forbes had some stuff for us on this as well. It does have the smaller footprint. It has that lower price point of $25,000. They talked about them wanting to eventually go to, and not only 2 million, but actually get up to 4 million cars a year coming out of the Mexico plant. It makes sense. The Mexico plant is going to be Tesla's largest gigafactory. And at 4 million a year, that's going to exceed the production in all of Tesla's other factories combined at this point. However, it would seem to be in line with Elon Musk's stated goal of wanting to get to 20 million vehicles a year of production by around 2030. And then they're using a 4680 battery that I had to look up. My curiosity got the better of me there. What's a 4680 battery really size-wise? What's an easy battery that I can compare it to? Take your alkaline D cell. Increase the size by about 25%, you have a 4680.
Interesting, yeah.
And so these batteries, now that they're starting to get produced in mass, they're going to have a combination of energy density and low supply or low production costs that make them a really ideal candidate for a low-cost car like this.
One of the things that, speaking of 4680 cells that we talked about with Sandy Munro, was the burning question: are these structural battery packs that use the 4680 cells with all that pink potting compound inside really throwaway items? And there were a number of magazine articles that came out after the, during and after the teardown that Sandy Munro's team did, which might lead one to conclude that these are not serviceable. And we always held that in reserve until we get one. And we attempt to do what we normally do, which is reverse engineer and find a way to repair these types of products. We're not going to be able to weigh in on this. So during the discussion with Sandy, I asked him, are you convinced that this pack is not repairable, that it is a throwaway? And he says, well, for you guys, maybe not. And then he gave us some tips on what we could do to get to the source of the battery problems. In order to work on a battery like this, by the way, there are going to be a couple of problems. It's either going to be electronics inside the pack, which I can't imagine they're going to pot and cover up and hide,
right?
Because that could be a replaceable CAN board, which throwing a whole pack away to get at that $300 board doesn't make any sense. The second one is resistive cells. And in a Tesla Model S, you have 7,104 cells. Just one of those going resistive will kill the car because the battery safety management system will only allow a charge to that lowest cell or brick. So we asked, is it possible to get at these cells? And he says, well, What we eventually did, and we tried a number of things, including some very harsh chemicals, because I brought that up, and he said, "Oh, don't use chemicals." Or you were
Yeah,
there.
I remember
Yeah.
that. I remember that.
They are highly carcinogenic, and there would be a safety issue trying to use chemicals to eat away at that pink poly compound. He said the most successful way they found to excavate these cells was dry ice.
Yeah.
And I couldn't initially get my head around, was he saying you take a cube of dry ice and set it on top of the pink poly? There apparently is a dry ice sandblasting or blasting method. The byproduct is carbon dioxide,
Okay.
and the stream that comes out looks like, the normal dry ice, white cloud,
Right.
but it's extraordinarily effective at gently taking away things like in an undercarriage of a car. All of those years of accumulated dirt and dust and stains, it just cleans that sort of thing miraculously. It reminded me of what we do sometimes, which is soda blasting, using regular baking soda instead of sand, which is much more aggressive,
Sure.
which can eat away at the paint and damage plastic. In the car restoration world, if you want to do a gentle sand blasting or blasting, you use soda. And it doesn't hurt the plastic and it doesn't hurt paint, but it does remove the things that you want to remove.
Okay, so it's not just a temperature thing then with the dry ice. It's actually the ability to blast it. And of course, dry ice being as cold as it is,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that the temperature might have something to do with removing the potting compound as well, cooling it off and making it brittle.
My vision, although we haven't investigated it thoroughly, is that the potting compound is somewhat compressible, that it is a softer type material because it looked kind of spongy. And what the dry ice would do is, first of all, make it extremely hard.
Right.
And then the blasting effort would remove the hardened material rather than cave in and allow it to bounce off of the material.
I'm kind of looking forward to seeing when that first opportunity comes for us. I realize it might not come for some time, though.
It looks like we'll have to buy another tool when that happens.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Okay.
Okay.
At the same time, I expect that the battery management technology will even get better than what it is right now. I mean, even in the Model S and even in the Roadsters, for that matter, software exists today that allows us to pinpoint down to the brick where we have potential problems. And so we don't have to go in and just do some sort of a search on a whole battery. We can go right to the correct module and even potentially right to the correct brick and start our search there. So we're not searching 7102 Model S cells. We're searching, 99 cells, I think is what it is.
Yeah,
inside
the
of a
99
single brick.
bricks, 69 cells per
Or
brick. And
69
that's a
cells.
Roadster.
So we get it already down to 69 in a 69 cells in a Roadster, and that number is very similar in the Model S.
Sure.
I can see that even though there are only 4 modules that are a foot wide in the length of the battery, I think we're going to be able to have those modules in bricks as well, and who knows, we might be able to get down closer to the cell level.
Yeah, I think Sandy mentioned that the BMW batteries are actually self-healing. And but what you mentioned makes a lot of sense. It just occurred to me that if we were able to put a sensing function on all of the cells in a multi-cell cylindrical battery pack, like the Tesla Roadster, you have 6,831 cells. The reason they come to us is because we find that one resistive cell and then take it out of circuit. But in order to do that, you have to do surgery. You have to put it up on a lift. You have to drop a 1,000-pound battery pack. You have to open it up. You have to take out one of 11 sheets. Then you have to have sensitive test equipment to find that one cell. There is sensing circuit that senses the bricks, all 99 of them. If you had sensing circuitry that could sense all 6,831 cells, it would alleviate the process that we go through, because with software, you could then disable that one offending cell without ever opening up the car or doing anything intrusive.
By all means. And with the 4680 being such a larger footprint of a battery, they're going to have probably only somewhere from a quarter to 1/3 the number of cells to have to manage in the first place.
Sure. And what jumps to mind immediately is a multiplexer chip, something that can read a number of different test points.
Yeah.
And then extrapolate that out, and the software then would take care of eliminating that one offending cell.
By all means, it's technology that exists today. I don't even think it would be that difficult. So I know we're getting up on the hour, so we need to just let's close up with a couple of questions.
Couple more, okay? LinkedIn, John Hickey. He's still with us. What are your thoughts on NEO and their battery exchange station model? I think it's antiquated. I think it's going to go away rapidly. I don't see it as a viable continued business model, considering that batteries are getting better, the energy density is getting better, the drive times or the ranges are expanding constantly. And having watched one of our YouTube collaborators, influencers in Norway, actually going through one of these battery swaps in the middle of winter, there was an enormous amount of hydraulics involved to handle a 1,000-pound battery pack. Kyle Connor, by the way, was the influencer that was filming this or was videotaping this. And it just seemed to me to be a very cumbersome, inefficient process with lots of engineering issues. And the ultimate issue was there was a charging station right next to this battery swap facility. And it took about, granted, maybe 8 to 10 minutes to do this battery swap. But what if they had spent a half an hour and just gotten a regular charge and went to the restaurant across the street and got a sandwich while they were waiting? It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. The logistics, the amount of engineering involved, the maintenance issues, I think it's a dead and dying technology. Now, that doesn't mean that EV manufacturers haven't tried. Remember, Tesla did this during one of the investor days or the shareholder meetings. They were pretty excited about a 90-second battery swap, and they actually achieved that up on a stage where Elon was standing.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on this, though, because I think about, okay, this weekend, I'm driving my electric vehicle. I have a Volvo XC40 Recharge, and I realize, I'm going to be just a little bit short for what I need. I go to the charging station, park, do a fast charge, leave. Total time, because I went ahead and timed it, 11 minutes. Of that time, 8 minutes and 30 seconds was charge. I added over 20% to my battery, and I have a 120 kilowatt battery, so that was about 24 kilowatts. Why would I wait for somebody to change an entire battery out when all I have to do is go in, park, and 10 minutes later be gone? That's almost service station level. Granted, I'm doing about a quarter of my battery charge. I don't care. Because come that evening, I know I'm going to just plug it in at home anyway. And the other part of that is I take care of my battery. I'm very careful to make sure that my battery doesn't get over 80% charge. What kind of schmuck is going to be having the battery that's just been put into my car if I'm getting my battery changed out all the time? I don't want that.
Right. Yeah, you don't quite know what you're going to get next.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there's the what could be considered the criminal aspect. You find out your battery is starting to die, right?
Yeah.
You go to a battery swap station. Will there be software that will be able to determine that you have just left them with a dud that should have really gone to the service center and had you spend $15,000 to $20,000 for a replacement? Those are all things that will have to be dealt with. And
great point.
Yeah.
Great point. TikTok, Leaf Village Outcast. Close out with this question. It says, guys, your content is super interesting and I respect what you do. But what's up with the shades?
This isn't the first time that we've been asked that question, and we have a video that will be released at some point that will give a full explanation. It will be very interesting, and I think in the meantime, what we encourage our viewers to do, if you want to get our full experience, put on your own sunglasses, and maybe you'll see what we see.
By all means. I know we're up past our hour. Thank you guys so much for the time that you spent with us. Call out to Jesse and Richard and Aaron. You guys do awesome work for us, especially Jesse with all the different sound issues he's been dealing with today.
I think he's losing hair back there. He's going to look like me before too long, but we have a bunch of new equipment back there, And we're still dialing it in. We always appreciate you guys joining us. And tomorrow at 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we have the Tesla Roadster podcast, which is it's unique to the Tesla Roadster owners, but we certainly welcome other people that are interested or curious about the car. And then Thursday at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 10 a.m. in the morning, we have our podcast like this, which is the general EV broadcast. So please join us, and we'll see you Thursday.
Take care.